Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created with Phaser 3. Previously, we worked on adding in support to loading custom fonts into our game using the web font loader. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be a link to the previous videos if you'd like to catch up. So let's get started. Alright, so at the end of our last video, what we did is we added in our support for loading the fonts to our web font loader. However, the method we're currently using for loading in our fonts and knowing when they're complete is in our create method for our preload scene. We're waiting until our font is fully loaded before we transition to our create scene. And so this works. However, another way we can achieve this is by using the built-in Phaser 3 loader plugin. And then that way we can hook into more of Phaser's core ecosystem for loading in files. And then that way this will be all done inside our preload method. And then that way we won't actually proceed to the create method until this file is loaded. And so this is a good mechanism for doing this, because then later on in other games, what you could do is you could reuse the functionality we're going to add here to go ahead and load in these font types, and then that way you would have them available by the time your create method is called. Because once your create method is called, this is when you start creating your game objects, and your font might not be available yet. And so if you're interested in a deeper dive into using fonts with Phaser 3, there'll be a link to a video in the description of this video. As well, there'll be a card on the screen now with a link to that video. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use our loader plugin, and what the loader plugin allows us to do is we can add in our own custom file types for files we want to load. And by extending the file, we can then use the loader plugin to add files to the loader for our current scene. And then what Phaser will do is once that file is added as part of our preload method, it'll be put into the queue. And basically at some point in our queue, our file will go ahead and get loaded, and it will not fire the create method until everything in the queue is cleared out. And so by extending the file and using this loader plugin, we then can connect that to our hooks that we have in our web font loader here. So for our active callback, and then that way we can tie them together. And so go ahead and do this. What we'll do is we're going to go ahead and make a new class in our source code. So we come back to our code. What we're going to do is under our source, we'll go into our assets folder, and let's go ahead and make a new file. And we're going to call this web font loader. We'll do web font file loader.js. And so inside our file, we'll go ahead and export out our class, and we're going to call this web font file loader. And this is going to extend the phaser.loader.file class. And so since we're extending, what we need to do is go ahead and call our super methods. We'll have our constructor. And for this, we are going to have our loader. So this will be the Phaser loader plugin. And then we're going to have an array of font names that we'll provide. And so for our constructor, we'll call our super method. And so when we create an instance of our Phaser file loader, we need to go ahead and provide the loader plugin. So that'll be our first parameter that we're providing. And then we need to go ahead and provide a file configuration. And so the first property we need to add is type. And so type is the type of file that is going to be loaded. So all of the loaders that are a part of the native Phaser library, so like when we want to load in JSON, load in images, all of those have their own custom file loaders for handling that file type and handling that data. And so when we want to load in our own custom files, we need to provide that type here. And so for our type, this is going to be for web font. And so after our type, we need to go ahead and specify a key. And so this is going to be the unique key for placing our loaded file data into our cache. So as we've seen before, anytime we load some type of asset through Phaser, it's available in that scene, but the loader plugins also make it available to the global cache. And then that way we can reuse that data through our various scenes. And so for our cache key, what we're going to do is we'll use our font names that are provided, and we'll do the toString method. And so what this is going to do is it's going to take all of the values in our array and create a string from that array. And then that way we should have a unique key for our cache. And so then that way, anytime we want to load in our web font families, we'll use that as our key. All right, so real quick, what we're going to do is we'll head in our js.comments. And so for our loader, this will be the phaser loader.loader plugin. And then for font names, this, like I said, will just be a string array. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add a new property to our custom class. And so we'll make a private property. We're going to call this font names. And so our property is just going to be a string. So we'll go ahead and add in our type. And so it'll be our string array. And then what we'll do in our constructor is we will just go ahead and set that property equal to our font names that are provided. All right, and so the last thing we need to do for our web font file loader is we need to go ahead and implement the load method. And so this method is going to be called by our file loader plugin. And what this will do is it's responsible for starting the actual file downloading. And so this is where we would have in our custom logic for handling our loading of our files. And so what that means for us is this is where we'll actually have our logic for using our web font loader to go ahead and load in our fonts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and copy our code out of our preload scene, out of our create method. And actually real quick, what we want to do is we need to place back in our start scene call, and let's copy our web font loader. And then we'll come over to our web font loader file. And then what we need to do is we need to actually load in our web font loader library. So if we come to the top of our preload scene, let's go ahead and copy our import statement. We'll add it to the top of this file. Let's go ahead and come down to our load method. And then so what we need to do is instead of manually specifying families here, we'll want to use the font names that we've provided to our web font file loader here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to replace this with this.font names. And this is already an array, so we can go ahead and get rid of the wrapper around that. And that's what we want to do inside our active callback. This is where we'll tell the loader plugin that, hey, we've loaded our files, proceed to the next file. And so to do that, we can reference our loader, and then we'll call the next file method. And then so when we call next file, we need to provide the instance of our file, so our phaser loader file that just finished loading. And so that'll be this, so the instance of this class that we create. And then we can specify if it was successful or not. And so when we have the active callback, this will only be invoked if our font is actually working properly. So we can set this to true. And so if we want to also track when we have failures, what we can do is we can add the inactive callback. And so when this happens, we can call the same logic here, and then we can set false here. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to add a console error just so we can keep track of these, and we'll do failed to load custom fonts. And then what we'll actually do is we'll go ahead and output our custom font names. So we'll go ahead and JSON and we'll stringify this font names. All right, and so now we've created our web font file loader, we need to create an instance of it in our preload scene. And so to do that, let's jump over to our preload scene. And then what we're going to do is we'll come to our preload method. And so what we'll do at the bottom of our preload method, we're going to go ahead and load in our custom fonts. So after our JSON data, we'll go ahead and do load custom fonts. And for this, we're going to do load, and we'll do add file. And now we can go ahead and specify our phaser loader file. So this will be our custom class that we just created. So we'll do a web font loader. And then we need to go ahead and specify, and then we need to go ahead and provide our loader plugin. So we'll do this.load, and then our font family names that we want to use. And so this will be our Kenny future narrow font name. Oh, and not web font loader. This is web font file loader. So we'll go ahead and fix our import. And let's get rid of our web font loader because it's not actually used here. And we'll go ahead and save. And I'm just going to throw the phaser library at the top. All right, so if we come over to our battle scene, what we should be able to do is when our scene refreshes, we should still see our custom text. However, if we want to go ahead and try to debug, what we'll do is we'll come to our webfont file loader. Let's go ahead and just do a console log real quick. File loaded, and then what we should see in our console log now is in our preload scene, we should see that preload is invoked, and we should see our files loaded, and then only after our files loaded do we go into the create method for our preload scene. And that's exactly what we were looking for. All right, so to go ahead and test our error functionality, what we're going to do is we'll come over to our preload scene, and we're just going to change our font family name to test. And so what's going to happen is when our file loader attempts to load our web font and it doesn't find it after a set period of time, web font loader is going to go ahead and call our callback for the inactive callback we provided. And so this event is going to be triggered when your browser doesn't support the fonts that are provided, or if it could not be found, it could not be loaded. And so that's what's happening here, is we can't find that test font. And so we see now we see now we have our error message in our console. However, because we're handling our error and we're telling the phaser loader to go ahead and move on to the next file, this allows us to make sure that this functionality doesn't break our game, because even though we can't find our custom font, we still want phaser to go ahead and load our other assets and continue to work. However, what this will mean is anywhere that we reference that asset, we won't actually have access to it. And so for your built-in loaders, like when we want to load in images, what's going to happen is those assets wouldn't be available, and like we'd have a broken image in our game. And so for our custom fonts, all that's going to mean is when we render out our fonts, it's not going to be the font family we want. It'll be the default font family supplied to phaser game objects. All right, so real quick, we'll just go ahead and revert our change to our font family name. And let's go ahead and remove our console log for our file loaded. All right, with that brings this video to an end. In our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to work on adding in our attack animations. So we'll be loading in our sprite sheets for our various attacks, slash and our ice attack. And we'll be creating our animations, and we'll be playing those inside Phaser. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see some of the links on your screen now.